Peace to the viewing audience. Welcome to day 3 of our devotions regarding what took place during Jesus' last week of living on the earth. We started off with Sunday, which we labeled as the day of celebration. And then on yesterday, we covered Monday, which I call the day of frustration. Today, we are up to Tuesday, and I like to label Tuesday the day of interrogation. Would you grab your Bibles and turn to Luke chapter 20, verses 1 through 8. Luke chapter 20, verses 1 through 8. I'm going to be reading from the NIV translation. You follow me along in the translation of your choice. And it is the story of how the religious rulers just went back and forth with Jesus, back and forth with him, trying to get him to either say or do something that would justify them crucifying him. I just want to look at verses 1 through 8, but I would encourage you to read this entire chapter to see how many times Jesus was interrogated on this Tuesday. You know, Luke is not the only writer to tell of what happened in Luke chapter 20, verses 1 through 8. Matthew tells this story and Mark tells this story in their individual writings. Matthew tells it in chapter 21, verses 23 through 27. Mark tells it in chapter 11, verses 27 through 33. But today I want to look at Luke's account in chapter 20, verses 1 through 8. And hear me when I say this is literally one of the most exciting reads in all of the Bible. Let me give you 3 elements to look for in Luke 20, verses 1 through 8. Number 1, the request of Jesus. The request of Jesus, verses 1 and 2. What was asked of Jesus? Number 2, the reply from Jesus, verses 3 and 4. Verses 3 and 4. What did Jesus have to say? What did Jesus have to say to the request? And then finally, verses 5 through 8, the response to Jesus. The response to Jesus. The request of Jesus, the reply from Jesus, and then finally, the response to Jesus. Follow me along as we look at this in the NIV translation. Verse 1 says, one day as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple courts and proclaiming the good news, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, together with the elders, came to him. And verse 2, they said, tell us, what authority you are doing these things, they said, and who gave you this authority? The request of Jesus. And whose authority are you doing these things? And who gave you this authority? But watch Jesus' reply, verses 3 and 4. He replied, I will also ask you a question. Tell me. Verse 4, John's baptism, was it from heaven or was it of human origin? They asked Jesus a question, and Jesus replied back to them with a question. And how many times have you and I heard down through the years since we were young, never answer a question with a question? But this is Jesus. He can do whatever he wants to do. So he said, you asked me a question, let me ask you a question. And watch the response to Jesus, beginning with verse 5. They discussed it among themselves. These are the religious leaders. They discussed it among themselves, and they said, if we say from heaven, he will ask, why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, all the people will stone us because they are persuaded that John was a prophet. So they answered Jesus this way, we don't know where it was from. Verse 8, Jesus says, neither will I tell you by what authority I'm doing these things. Go on, Jesus, with your bad self. They interrogated him, but Jesus was able to make them look bad. And you know what I believe? You know what I believe this narrative teaches us about the day of interrogation as it relates to Jesus? I think it teaches us the way we should handle being interrogated by people. The way we should handle being interrogated by people. And I want to close by giving you three elements to handle other people interrogating you, taken from the life of Jesus. Number one, Jesus teaches us we can respond to being interrogated confidently. Confidently. Remember, they asked Jesus a question, and he came right back, and in a bold and confident way, he posed the question right back to them. There was no trepidation. There was no fear. There was no doubt. He was not scared in any way, because he teaches us when we're being interrogated, we can respond confidently. Here's number two. Jesus teaches us that when we're being interrogated by others, we can not only respond confidently, but we can respond kindly. Kindly. Ooh, I lost some of you right there, because some of us, our theme and motto of life is, if you don't start none, it won't be none. But if you come with the smoke, I can make it smokier. Jesus responded in a kind way. He never raised his voice. He never got indignant. He never treated them in an inhumane way. And could God be saying to you and I that when interrogation comes our way, learn how to respond kindly. And then finally, we learn from this narrative that when we're being interrogated, not only must we respond confidently, not only must we respond kindly, but we can respond triumphantly. T-R, do the best you can. Triumphant. You know what that means? Respond in a way where it leads to victory and not defeat, where it ends up with you being a winner and not a loser. And thank God that on Tuesday, during Jesus' last week on life, he didn't let being interrogated get the best of him. And if he overcame, guess what? You and I can do the same thing. So when interrogation comes your way, respond confidently, respond kindly, and respond triumphantly. Thank you so much for being a part of day number 3. And take this as your personal invitation to join me back tomorrow for day number 4 of what happened during Jesus' last week on life. This is all of my time. Thanks for your time.